Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave podcast here at the Culture Wave Media Network. And we are here hot off the heels of the holiday season because on Christmas Eve, we had an episode drop of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. It is episode 5 of the show titled You Have a Lot to Learn About Pirates. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. And in the producer chair this week, we have Mark Jacobino.
Woo! How's it going, Darian? Happy holidays. Hi, everyone. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Of course, a very rich Christmas history in the Star Wars world with their remarkable Christmas special, obviously.
I still have never seen it, actually.
Neither have I. We might have to do a live watch next year.
Do we want to do that?
That'd be fun, though. I feel like it might be fun. We might be miserable, but maybe we can get drunk during it. That'd be fun, too.
There you go.
There you go.
Holiday cheer.
We need the drinks from the cantina.
Oh, at
Disney World. Yeah, exactly.
Edge?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which one? I don't know. I forgot what they're called.
I like a lot of them. But anyway, into the world of Skeleton Crew, we are here to discuss this episode that a lot of people are already calling it their favorite episode of the show. We're 5 episodes in, and there's a big moment that happens, which we won't spoil yet. We'll wait till the end of the review, or later on in our conversation, I should say. But this gives us more upon what the show is. It's bread and butter, right? It's this sort of globe-trotting experience throughout the galaxy with Jod and the kids, and we end up going to this world. Do you remember the name of it? It's called...
No,
Luperia,
they make a joke about it, but it's essentially the world where the pirate had hidden its treasure beforehand, and it's a spa world now. It's been kind of overtaken by commerce and pleasure, and now it's they're looking for the treasure under this spa, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a cool sort of change of pace in terms of the platform and where they're this different sort of world, and I love how 33 is still in his mode of being like, this is the worst place you'll ever go. It's what he calls it, like the Devil's Bath.
Yeah,
he calls it like a bunch of different crazy names, and they show up, and it's like a spa planet, which is really cool. It's a different setting. You get a hut reference,
a
and
patron.
You see
a hut patron.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of, again, playing into the elements of bringing in these Easter egg type things in the Star Wars galaxy to make it still feel like it's a Star Wars show. Not taking it away from the things that are familiar to us, but also the mystery of this planet At Attin. And they're still looking for the coordinates. And they get to this planet, and a lot of things happen on this planet. But there's a big thing that happens at the end of the episode. So at this point, if you haven't watched the episode yet and you're watching our review, go watch the episode and then come back, because we're going to get into spoilers, because this is the biggest reveal or moment that kind of happens within the series thus far. But we finally get the coordinates of At Attin that we've been chasing for, at this point, 4 3/4 episodes by the time the moment happens. And we get, in pro wrestling terms, what they call a heel turn. Jod completely turns against the kids. And we had a feeling that was going to happen. There are moments that lead up to it that they kind of... You talked about it before we started recording, but it's like the conveniences. But there's also some very typical cliche sort of topical things that happen. One of them that stood out to me, obviously, was the conversation Jod has with Wim, right? Wim is not feeling confident about himself. He's missing home, all these things. And Jod has a conversation with him about his abilities and what he's able to do, which leads to a moment later on as well. But the Jod turn, right? He turns to a bad guy after he gets the kids to the point which he tells them he will get them to. But he doesn't kill the kids. He doesn't hurt the kids. He threatens them that he will, but he doesn't end up doing it. How did you feel about the moment and the timing of the moment in relation to us having about 3 episodes left of the show?
Yeah, I mean, this needed to happen. We needed a jolt into the show. The show had been good so far, and there had been some really great standout moments, but it's also maybe gotten a bit safe. So if you have an adventure, a mystery type story, you need to kind of have a big twist. You need to keep the audience on its toes, and it can't just be these mysteries that are still vague. I mean, we're still interested about them, and they give us little hints like, is Jod really a Jedi? What is At Attin? But you do need another hook, and usually it's a big twist. And I wouldn't say this is the biggest twist, because obviously Jod was never someone we were supposed to trust. Everyone told the audience whenever they met him, they're like, hey, this is Crimson Jack, don't trust him. And the kids, through their experience with him, he had been looking out for them. they started to subconsciously trust him, and I love that we finally got the twist. I think Jude Law does a great job. The second he gets into that treasure chamber, you see that switch in his head go off. We see him like have a little bit of a maniacal laugh when he gets in there. And I like how serious they make the moment feel by having him actually threaten the life of a young person, not even just a young person, a young girl. So a grown man was going to go into combat with a small child, which is crazy. It just highlights the severity of what he is and in this moment, and that he is the epitome of selfishness. And I really enjoyed the moment.
I was going to say the same thing. I thought that the moment, directorially and acting wise, was very believable in the sense where even the pacing of the scene, I felt like I watched the scene twice, and I went back and I rewound, and it's just like the perfect amount of pausing, right, too, between the actors, especially Jude Law, in the moment where she's like, well, we know like that we had a fair deal, right? Like this is what it is. And I also love how you're getting the different reactions from all the kids, where like Fern is very obviously like, she is aware of what a mint is. She is aware of the severity of the situation. She is aware that she's never trusted Jod in the first place. And you're getting more moments episode by episode. Like every episode we've gotten a new name for Jod's character. Every single episode, a new thing that he goes by, whether it's Crimson Jack or he gets a new name dropped by the other new character that gets introduced in this episode, another bounty hunter. Yeah. But so she has her reaction. Wim is just, unfortunately, like he's not a very intelligent kid. So he's the one that's saying, what is a mint? I don't know what that even is. Yeah. Then he realizes, oh, like that's amazing. You can just have unlimited money, whatever you want. It's explaining it to the audience, but it's doing it in a way that's also showing and revealing just who these characters are and how they are, right? And then Neil has the moment where he's like, we really are the world of treasures or whatever at Attin.
Yeah.
So, and KB is
crying. You see right below her visor there is a tear that comes down. It's a darkly lit scene, but she is crying.
Okay, that's an even deeper meaning, I feel like, in that scene to show how she feels about the moment. But I just love that it was the first time in a while that it felt like a Star Wars scene was adult. And especially in a show that is obviously so centered around children, like to still reset the expectation and the tone of the show and the tone of the moment. I just thought it was a great job. Like overall, like you felt the tenseness of that scene, the way that the kids were feeling and all of them individually, and just what his overall mission is, like who he is as a person or as a character, at least to this moment.
And right before that, he orders SM-33 to literally disintegrate the people behind the door. Like that is a very dark moment, and it completely shifts the tone of the scene. Right from the start, you're like, okay, like we knew Jod was, a questionable character, but that's dark. That's deep, dark selfishness right there.
100%. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's also a moment with the tenseness of the scene. It can get overlooked because you're so connected to the kids, which I want to ask you about that too, especially because we get to this moment where you feel for the kids. Do you feel like you're getting yourself more connected to the kids week by week? Are there certain moments that stood out to you? And like, again, the scene with Wim for me was a really great scene. Did you feel similarly? And in terms of the stuff with the kids, how are you feeling at 5 weeks into the show?
Yeah. I really like Wim's scene. I want to kind of deep dive into that. But I think Fern has really been the surprise for me in this show. I think her actress is the strongest of all the kid actors. I think she has these great moments of realization that she's not as in control of her world as she thinks she can be. And in the moment when he does flip and she is faced with the reality that this grown man is prepared to kill her for this treasure, we do see that Jod does hold back. If he wanted to, he could have just taken her out, but he doesn't, because there is something in him that prevents him from doing that. So I'm really liking Fern. I think Neil and KB again. Neil had his big week last week. KB has been in the background a lot. She had that nice spark in episode 3, I think it was, where she kind of calls Jod out. So I would like to see more from her. But the Wim scene was great because it was it's not meta, but it's very much toying with the traditional ideas of Jedi, where he's like, those attachments let go of him. You don't need him. And it gives us more kind of clues into Jod's background, because on one hand, he very much could have been trained by a Jedi, and he took those lessons way too seriously or way too on the nose. And when they said have no attachments, he completely became a selfish person. Like, oh, okay, I don't need anyone. I don't need to rely on anyone, which is really cool because, again, that's a very realistic way that the Jedi Order's teachings can be misconstrued by someone like Jod. But we don't know if that's the truth. Again, he's still using the Force, but I still think there's that something there in the background that they want us to question. Is he really Force sensitive? Because as of right now, it seems like he's only used the Force on metallic things, and we've talked about like magnets and stuff like that before. I again hope he is Force sensitive, but they are really good at planting those seeds that, do we know the answer yet or do we not? So I really appreciated that scene with Wim, because it zoomed out and was like, let's think about the Jedi Order from a different perspective than what we're used to.
It reminded me a bit about the way that how cynically Chimere looked at the Force and being a Jedi as well.
Yep.
Better executed, obviously, in this.
Yeah.
Even though I do think Chimere was probably the saving grace of Acolyte, like the only thing that I enjoyed from the show, my takeaway. But I definitely got that vibe from it. I'm also just interested in how it's going to further relate to Wim's story, because Wim is our central character from the beginning of the story. It's obviously about the kids, and Jod is probably going to play a bigger role, whether it's going forward in this show, whether it's a potential season 2, whether it's going further along in this universe. But I think that there's something there with Wim, and you think you're going to get, and I love this part too, that happens at the end when he tries to be a hero with the lightsaber.
Yeah.
And again, like, it's realistic to me that a kid, like, even with the, let's say even the lightsaber was like right side up, right? The amount of force and power that they might have on just a regular person, and a kid who's probably overall nervous, the fact that he opens the lightsaber upside down and it bounces around and away from him and he just like scurries towards his friends. It just feels a lot in that same vein as like what they're going for by paying homage to things like the Goonies, and the way that like this show is supposed to still remain with the fact that these are kids that are learning to come of age in their own way because they're on this journey with this rogue, essentially.
Yeah. And there's that moment where you see that and you immediately think of the there's that meme where, you know, Luke gets the lightsaber from Obi-Wan in A New Hope and he's looking like down the barrel of it.
Yeah.
And it's like if he accidentally pressed the button, like the story would just end. So I thought the same thing when I was watching Wim and he turns it on upside down. I'm like, I feel like the creators were very much nudging us, like, you thought the same thing. From that internet meme.
They're really good with the tongue-in-cheek stuff in relation to whether it's things in pop culture or things that exist within Star Wars or things that exist within the world at large. Like, I was reading an article before about a character that kind of sets off the whole ending and getting the coordinates, that we have this reveal of SN-33's old captain, whose name is Tak Renaud. And Richard Donner is the director of The Goonies, which the show pays homage to, and Renaud backwards is Donner. So it's like, even something that's as fun as a little Easter egg like that, it is the creators paying tribute. And the thing that I love about that, which we've talked about in the past with like things like Andor, like they're paying, like they're giving care to the show. It doesn't feel like it's something where they're just throwing things at the wall and be like, this would be a cool idea, let's do that. It's like there's a reason for everything. You know what I mean? Like that's I think what separates really great creators from people that are just like, let's just make a show with a fun story and see how it goes. You know what I mean? But I am interested to see how the continuing story of Wim's real outlook of what Jedis mean and good versus evil, and that conversation that Jod had. And I had asked you early on in the show, do you think we're going to get a flashback to show anything of Jod's past? And I think that, like you were talking about, so much of what Jod is saying can be related back to what he experienced, whether it was when he was younger, whether it was when he was turned against by his team. Like, do you think that we get anything like that? We still have 3 weeks of show left, and one of those episodes you would think you might get the longer finale. Like, we haven't gotten it in a while, but I feel like we're gonna.
Yeah, I hope so. I still think that it would be more impactful if Jod delivered it directly to the kids, not in some sort of flashback. But where Jod is now, you really can't trust where he's coming from or talking about his past. But I think that might be the turning point moment for him if he does have the Han Solo Heart of Gold turn, where he opens up to the kids and he realizes, like, hey, maybe I don't need to just be for myself anymore. I think that's where we might get that big reveal.
Where do you think they go now that they're separated again? Because the episode ends with, and then we'll backtrack because there are some things earlier on in the episode. We're just working in reverse.
Yeah.
But the kids, he tells SM-33 that he wants to take them. He says I order you to take them prisoner. As trying to start a mutiny against their captain. He obviously Fern yields, and Wim has the idea to go down the trapdoor when they're going through the sequence with all the booby traps, which I think is also a really fun nod to like Indiana Jones, which is cool. It's another Lucasfilm property. But we separate them, and then we see obviously Jod take control of the lightsaber.
Do you think it turned red when he turned it on? Because they do cut right when it turns on.
Yes.
So I think and again, that might just be for people to speculate for a week and get some hype, but we do know that if you are attuned to the dark side, or if you're leaning more towards the dark side, that sometimes that affects the lightsaber crystal. Is a very deep conversation on lightsaber bleeding, so I don't know. Again, it was a cool image in the Acolyte, but how it works in Star Wars, I don't think that would be the way it is, because Anakin fought in Revenge of the Sith against Obi-Wan with a blue lightsaber when he had clearly just committed genocide.
So I will say this in terms of just speculating, because I don't want to. I think your question is more about the relation of the character and what that could mean.
Yeah.
I still think that there is good in Jod. And I think, like you alluded to it, it's in the conversation where he could just be a homicidal maniac with these kids. Like, there is that. You get the reveal a couple moments before that with the acid and the pirates that he is cold-blooded at times. He could be. He has the ability to be that way. I don't know if that's really who he is, though. I still don't know if you really have seen that yet, and I don't know if maybe it's just because I like Jude Law on the show. Maybe it's because I do believe the character's intentions. But I would say no. Also, if it was based on the idea of, again, good versus evil, because I still think there is goodness in him. I think that he feels betrayed by the world.
Sure.
And I'm interested to see if they play into that more based on what he's experienced in his past, whether that is when he's a kid or whether that's even what happens to him. Because we get that first scene in the show.
Yeah.
That gives you, there has to be a callback to that at some point, right? You'd have to assume.
There's enough empathetic moments he has with the kids that just tell you he's not a cold-blooded killer. There's too many moments where he could have just walked away and not engaged the conversation, but he came back for it. So, yeah. What was? Oh, I was gonna ask. Oh, Kerry Condon and that whole storyline.
Yes, that's where I was gonna backtrack to.
Yes.
So
that's good.
Look at this. This is called segue. The beginning of the episode, backtracking.
Yes.
Opens with a scene with two characters that we mentioned last week that we haven't seen. And it felt like it was a long time. I think it was the beginning of episode 3, but in terms of runtime, that means you're going like 70 minutes without seeing these two characters. One of them being an Academy Award nominated actress was pitched as one of the leads of the show, essentially. Which, whatever, that's a whole other conversation. But we get Wim's dad. Who, you remember his name? I'm forgetting.
Wendell.
We get Wendell, and we get Kerry Condon's character. Remember her name?
No.
Or no? All right, we'll get that information in a second.
Farrah?
I think you might be right. I think it is Farrah. It is Farrah. Okay.
Ooh.
Wendell is approached by Neil's mom at his place of business, and she tries to do something under the table. First time that we see these townspeople trying to do something else to take matters into their own hands, to locate their children that we have no reference point of how long they've been gone.
Right.
Which I hope we do get that, because I'm curious. I feel like that's important. But she wants Wendell to access it's the access code for the barrier.
Yeah.
And he is very hesitant to do so, which plays very much in line with his character. And he's worried that if he does something and he gets caught, it's going to be a problem at work. He does get caught in what I think is a funny scene. And it's one of the security droids. Do you know what are they called something specific? Or okay. Not important. Gets caught by the security droid. He gets brought upstairs to the office of Farah, Carrie Condon's character, who's also the mother of Fern. And she initiates the robot to shut down and erase everything that they had seen.
Mm-hmm.
Having the back of Wendell, which is an interesting thing because based on what we've seen, which is little, from her character, it feels like she was more of the authoritarian governmental type.
Yeah.
But you see the personal side of she knows who Wendell is. She obviously is aware of the feeling that he must have where he has been without his son for quite some time. She's been without her daughter. So I thought that was an interesting contextualization for two characters we haven't seen in weeks now.
Yeah.
Did you feel similarly?
Yeah, I think it does establish that she's not fully gung-ho with the whole authoritarian regime. She will go outside the bounds for her daughter. I mean, Wendell does call her out and say, hey, you've been trying to go through the correct avenues and we haven't gotten anywhere. So it's time we kind of take things into our own hands, which I think is great. I think that one of my hesitancies around this storyline so far in this show is that I wish we maybe had gotten a glimpse or more of a glimpse into it last week or something along those lines. Like you said,
to give it more time.
It's hard to establish how long the kids have been away and how much this has really been eating away at these parents, especially Carrie Condon, if she is so a part of the regime that she would come to this point to say, like, no, I'm going to tell my droid to turn off. I'm going to go against protocol. That all feels like important context, and we might see more of it these next 3 episodes because, as you said, this is an Academy Award nominee as an actress, and she maybe has 5 minutes of screen time throughout the entire season. So that's underwhelming. I hope we see more and they're able to kind of stretch their muscles a bit more, the parents. But I do like that they're involved in the story, and they'll ultimately, at least that's what it's setting up to be the ones to find the kids, bring them back, and then there'll be a face-off of some sort with Jod and the kids reunited. Maybe. That's my guess.
I'm curious also with the fact, and this is always just my mind thinking ahead, but I think about it where, like Ray Stevenson's character in Ahsoka, right? God rest his soul, amazing actor, great role in Ahsoka. There was more to his story that was to come, right? And we still got more screen time with him within probably a 5-episode period than we did with Carrie Condon. But I am curious if it's a bit of a conduit to the future of what this series might have. One of my biggest criticisms, and I feel like we've both talked about this, is we love just when television is done with a complete story in mind, and then you can continue on if you have ideas for how you want to continue the story, but giving you a nice clean ending. So I hope that's not the case. But I do agree with the fact that, like, we haven't gotten much of her character at all. Like, I would argue we got even maybe a little bit more information in terms of Pocket as a character in one episode, and maybe a little bit less screen time than we got with Farah. And Pocket is played by Kelly MacDonald, who's also like a decently big actress, like Emmy award winner.
Which one's Pocket?
She is the one that he comes across in the spa, and she calls the wolf.
The gray skinned
yes,
woman.
Yeah. Okay. But so that's also actress of name. That is a character in which we know that they had a previous relationship with Jod. They give Jod a different name, so we're aware of that. And I don't think it's the last we see of her character. With Farah, I don't know what is to come with her. And I agree with you in terms of the only thing that sucks is even if we get more time in the previous or the following episodes, it's not going to be paced as well because we could have been kind of jumping back and forth a little bit more with that kind of stuff. I just don't know if the creators wanted to focus on the adults, which I also understand. But then it's like, why do you cast someone like Carrie Condon in that role? Yeah.
Because again, no offense to Carrie Condon, but I wouldn't say she's a big name in the sci-fi community. So like casting her maybe attracts the attention of more casual Hollywood attendants. But if you look at it from a Star Wars thing, it would be like, probably most Star Wars fans are like, I recognize her, but I couldn't name her.
Well, I was going to say, I think, and it's a little, again, different level because sci-fi, it's a little different, but like, it feels a bit like Carrie-Anne Moss.
Right, yeah.
But Carrie-Anne Moss is in the Matrix and a major part of the Matrix, and I think people who have seen Star Wars have probably more likely seen the Matrix rather than the Banshees of Inisherin, but I agree with what you're saying. I think that we need to give a little bit more time with the adults to understand the severity of what's happening, and we still need more context about At Attin. Like, we're getting there, but we're not going to spend the last 3 episodes of this season in At Attin. We're not going to spend all 3 episodes there. I don't think. Do you?
No. I think there's going to be a world where Jod maybe tries to contact the maybe not. Like the wolf leader of the pirate crew. I could see him trying to parlay with him, a nice pirate parlay to be like, hey, you're chasing me. The kids are out of the way. I have the coordinates of At Attin. I go there. I give you some of the treasure. You get off my back. We go our separate ways. Because Jod needs someone to work off of at this point. If the kids are gone, it'll be nice to see them being super independent. You know, what have they learned from being out in the world and in these dangerous situations, and how they're going to get back home, how their parents are going to talk to them. But I agree, it's going to be a lot to kind of fit in, but I don't think they're going to dive that deep into At Attin. At least maybe not the historical context of, you know, how this old Republic mint has stayed off the radar for so long, and they've just been printing money on credits, and they just have an unlimited supply. But it is something that we talked about earlier. Like, that was one of the exciting selling points of the show, was that we're going to get this mystery, and it needs to pay off for the show to feel earned.
Yes.
Like you earn that ending. And I want them to have that answer for At Attin, make it realistic, make it interesting, but also, is there a mystical element? Because I know when you asked me, like, what were my theories, I was like, I want it to be interesting, but I want it to also have that mystical piece to it. If it's just
in the bigger landscape of Star Wars,
if it's just a mint, if it's just like a U.S. Treasury building that's just printing credits, like, that's kind of boring. Like, I hope there's a little bit more. There's some theories that At Attin is a conduit for the First Order and the funding that the First Order received, because this is in between 6 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
So is At Attin working with First Order, like Imperial remnants, to start funding the creation of, you know, the First Order fleet? You know, we're building the Starkiller base, which is an enormous investment that you would need a lot of money for. Obviously, the Rise of Skywalker is a train wreck, but there is the logistics of how Sidious had all of those Star Destroyers on Exco built and ready to go. So you could look at it like economically that might be the connection point that they're going for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, how
have you
feeling?
thought? Well, I have another question.
Sure.
We talked early on about how I had heard maybe, and I maybe had misquoting, but let's just stick in the argument that it is, that it may connect to this eventual Filoni movie.
Yeah.
Right? Within the world of The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, the Book of Boba Fett, all these things that take place over the same time period. Have you thought about, not theorizing necessarily like a larger thing, but in terms of making something like that work, have you thought about how it can have any effect on that in a larger sense? Like, do we think At Attin might be working with Thrawn? Is that a possibility?
I think the most likely is that At Attin is some sort of shell for the Imperial Remnant fleet, and that's how they're funding their missions and how they're still, you know, putting together fleets, and, you know, the super troopers that not super troopers, but, like, you know, the troopers that we saw on Mandalore that Gideon had created. They got Beskar. Like, all of that requires a lot of funding, and of course you could dig into the nitty-gritty of, you know, localized Imperial Remnant generals who are taking over planets and kind of funding it that way. But I think most realistically, the kids and Jod aren't going to be joining the crew of the Mandalorian or whatever during Thrawn's invasion of the galaxy. But I think that their story loosely can connect to it through At Attin and planets similar to At Attin that are off the radar. So the New Republic would never know that. Where's this funding coming from? How does the Imperial Remnant still function, even in its decrepit state? So that, I think that's how they can connect, and I think that's more interesting than if they were just like, let's join up. I think it's more interesting to just make it more worldly.
So I agree with that. Two theories going forward.
Sure.
If that is the case, which I think is possible, and you're more intelligent on this stuff than I am, but I think that's definitely viable. I think that Talk, who we get introduced to in this episode via a hologram.
Okay.
We don't
Is that the wolf guy?
No, Talk is the former captain that we don't see his face.
Oh, the pirate guy.
Yes, the pirate guy. And the kids are like, why can't we see him? Jod immediately shushes them. And he's like, I'm the only one that knows these coordinates. And SM has been saying throughout the whole show that, like, he's always told me I had to wipe myself clean.
Yeah.
Right? So there is that element of that he is trying to keep things a secret too. Talk, I do feel like, might have to be living within the world of At Attin to be that communication between the New Republic to get the money.
With the Imperial Remnant.
Imperial Remnant.
Okay, yes.
He's going to be seen by the end of the show.
Yeah.
In a sense where I think that he's going to have a bigger effect in the world of At Attin. And I think Jod might think he's gone. Jod might think he's dead.
I see.
So that's one thing that I'm theorizing.
Yep.
Second thing is, I had alluded earlier to Pocket playing a bigger role. I think Pocket is going to be the reason that these kids get off the planet.
Okay.
Because I can't imagine these kids getting off by themselves.
Right.
I just can't. And they're still in this world. We know that by the end of the show. I mean, they're not going to take a tube to a different fucking planet, but you know what I mean? Like, somebody has to help them get there, and Pocket has something that she wants to get from him. She wants revenge, whatever it might be, right? So that's a smaller thing that could just happen next week. But like you were talking about how the parents want to get in touch with them, I think that still happens, but I don't think it's going to be something where they're like, oh, like they're coaching them through it, or it's not something where the kids go on their own little adventure again to try to get themselves back to where they need to get to.
Right.
That wouldn't be realistic to me.
Yeah, no, I like both of those theories. Going real inside baseball here, the original script for episode 9 of
Trevorrow's script. Yeah.
Trevorrow's script, correct. Yeah. He initially, like, the opening parts of the story talk about the connection with the First Order and the underworld, the pirates type world. And the way people usually gain power is through those legal avenues. So it would make sense for those motivations to align. So if they do go down that route, I think it's good. I think it's very interesting. And then the second point, which I'm now blanking again. Sorry, the holidays.
It gets to you.
I'm done. What was the second point that I totally agreed with?
Pocket helping the kids off.
Yes. I agree that she got a little bit too much of a spotlight for an alien character to just kind of go away. So she's lived in this world. She's obviously talking to the pirates, but she also maybe is making her own deals with like the kids. Like, hey, where'd Jod go? Oh, he did find that treasure in that ad. Maybe we can make a little deal if you get me to Jod and maybe some of that treasure. Yeah, so I agree. I think those are two good theories.
I can see that. And again, they're still kids, and even if they're learning more along the way and they're coming of age, they're also a bit idiotic, some of them. Like they'll do whatever they need to do to get home, whether it's trusting an alien woman that they know has murderous intent against Jod.
Well, it was cool to see her as like because I very much think that she's a Night Sister, the same race as Asajj Ventress, just without the markings. I thought it was just cool to see on screen because Morgan Elsbeth didn't really have that look that Asajj Ventress does, and maybe. No, I think it's cool that there's a live action kind of Asajj Ventress type character, and I hope we continue to see more.
Yeah, I thought the makeup was also great because Kelly MacDonald is one of the leads of one of my favorite shows of all time, Boardwalk Empire, which was on HBO.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I looked at the whole scene like I was staring at her, and I'm like, who is that? I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Like fully couldn't tell who she was. And that is her Scottish accent that she has in real life, which she doesn't have in Boardwalk. So I'm like, oh, this is like very different than what I was expecting. But I thought she did a good job with the little time she gets.
The show has looked great. I thought the space, not the space shots, but the shots of the ships coming in over the mountains, those looked fantastic. It's much more well lit than other Star Wars shows, I feel, in most scenes. And I think the camera work has just been a lot more dynamic,
100%
moving, not just still shots. So, and those pauses that you were talking about earlier, just letting the camera just sit there, let the comedic pause live, and it lands because the camera's not doing too much. And so I think just in general, like you've said a lot of times, they've had experienced filmmakers working on this, 100%. And you can tell the difference in the quality that we're seeing.
Yeah, Jake Schreier directed this episode, and he is going to direct Thunderbolts in May, the Marvel movie. But he also worked on, I don't know if you watched the show, but he did season 1 of Beef on Netflix, which I think is a great get for Skeleton Crew. I think it's a great show that has a lot of, again, it balances humor and drama, though this is, again, more kid-friendly. You still get, especially in this episode, more serious moments. So I think the direction's been great. I think that the mix of CGI and practical effects, and if they've used the volume, I don't know if they have, but they've done a great job in terms of just really making this show feel bigger, even though it's a show that's, again, based around kids. So much of it, like, it's more enticing, I think, week to week than anything we've seen in a while. So, a lot of things to think about.
Any criticisms? I feel like we've kind of danced around any criticisms with this episode.
The only thing that we talked about a little bit was I think there were a lot of conveniences, which the other thing that I go back and forth with this show, though, is that it's still not something, like, it's hard because Andor is the only show that I don't feel like has conveniences. Like, I think Star Wars is kind of built a little bit on conveniences at times. And I don't know if that's also because of directorially, like, and writing wise. Like, I was thinking, like, George Lucas has a lot of conveniences, I think, in Star Wars. You know what I mean? And one of the things I also want to really quick, and then you could definitely get into your cons, but initially, I'm pretty sure George Lucas's prequel trilogy was supposed to revolve around a lot of, there was supposed to be like a pirate syndicate ran by Darth Maul. I had read that somewhere. I don't know if you ever heard that or not, but they play into, like, we've been talking week to week about the influence on pirate culture and what that means for the show, because it's very in your face. It is. I mean, in the episode title, you have a lot to learn about pirates. It's specifically saying. So even in terms of the Trevorrow things, maybe trying to connect it to initially what George's real ideas of Star Wars were, right? The underworld aspect of it. How are you feeling about that? Is that a con for you? Are you enjoying it more and more, learning more about that world? Or
no, I want to see more of it. I like the underworld stories. I feel like in live action they haven't really been shown. Mandalorian, we get introduced to it, but by episode 3 or 4 of the first season, he's kind of not in that world anymore. He's like avoiding that world. Book of Boba Fett had an opportunity to be in that world, but it didn't know what it wanted to be as a show.
That was a shame.
That show could have absolutely, it set up the Pikes. It had him trying to be the daimyo and set up his own power structure. And even Solo, they set up Darth Maul at the end of that movie, the Crimson Dawn, like, pirate, the underworld is going to be a big factor. That didn't come to fruition. So live action needs that underworld view, which is really fun. And it makes me think of Mr. Jeremy Allen White playing Jabba the Hutt's son.
That's very true. It's very true. The other thing that I'm glad you just brought that other part up too, though, is they've tried this time and time again, haven't been successful. All 3 things you've mentioned have been failures on some accord, right? Book of Boba Fett was it was a show, it was a movie, it was a show. A lot of people wanted to get their way in. It was a gangster story within the world of Star Wars, and they couldn't crack it that way. The other one you brought up before Solo was what? What was the other one?
Mando. It was living in that underworld, but it kind of started to separate itself.
It ventures itself out. Obviously, we get spoiler if you haven't watched Mandalorian, but you get Baby Yoda, you get Luke Skywalker, like you get a lot more bigger sort of stories. And one of the exciting things about Solo for me, and I remember talking about this with you on the podcast, I went on your podcast to talk about this, and I was like, I think Solo's underrated because I think there are moments in there that are really good nuggets of really great stuff that we haven't seen in Star Wars in a long time or ever. And I think the problem is just that the unfortunate reality is they center it around a character that is so beloved, and you can't get somebody to come in and do an impression. And I think Alden Ehrenreich did the best that he could do with it. But Han Solo is one of the most iconic characters ever, and it didn't work for that reason. With this show, they might be doing a really interesting thing where they are introducing it in a way by centering it around kids to have a bigger overall thing, which is kind of the backbone of what Star Wars is when it's successful,
right?
In my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Of course. Yeah. It's how kids kind of make their way in the galaxy. Just, with Luke, he was a bit older.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that that's the way we're going with the show. I like, similar to you, I think these stories need to be touched upon a little bit more. Like Acolyte, I was excited to see that they were going to do something different, but it just felt very vanilla and not great. But even Andor, like, it was giving you a different perspective because you're getting these everyday characters within the world of Star Wars having a bigger meaning into what it could all mean going forward. Even though we know the ending of Rogue One, it's still something that we're excited and anticipating the lead up to it.
For sure.
In terms of cons, the biggest thing for me with this episode really was the conveniences. Like, that was the thing where there were certain moments with characters, none that I'm really thinking of off the top of my head because we watched this episode like right before we started recording. But
yeah, I mean, there's the big Cthulhu squid monster thing.
Cthulhu,
They kind of fall down in the basement. They just strike up a conversation with this guy, and then he also has like a club tentacle that he's able to break the floor so they could get down to where they need to go. Very convenient.
Interesting character design.
Very interesting character.
We've never
design.
seen something like that in Star Wars, right?
No, that was an enormous big squid.
It was like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
Is essentially what it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that was convenient. When they get to the spa, they're like, no kids allowed, and they're wearing these like terrible costumes, and they bring them into the concierge, and they're like, oh, okay, so where are we gonna put you? And I get it. There's like the bribery aspect, but it's also like those are clearly not kids.
That was the one that was the worst for me. But I do think it was also like playing. They did the Little Rascals thing essentially, like just putting them under a costume, whatever. The more interesting thing to me was when he was paying the woman at the hotel with one. Again, I don't even know if you can give me the context, but one credit as like just okay, like we're gonna break all the rules of this.
Yeah.
Very prestigious spa that all these people are coming to. That to me seemed far-fetched. Like that seemed like it didn't make a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I think just zooming out, there are conveniences in the show, but they're not dumb. Like they're not like Obi-Wan sneaking out of the Inquisitor base with a big trench coat and a girl hiding under his thing, and he has a full beard and just a terrible hat, and just like that's a dumb convenience. Mm-hmm. That's annoying. That's like that's insulting our intelligence.
Yes.
These conveniences are more playful in the fact that I think I said this off camera that, those 80s movies, there was conveniences in them, but you're having so much fun watching, and there's so many cool and interesting ideas going on that you're just like, it's fine. It's fine. And the moment with the squid in the basement, like it's just like, that's fine. Like, whatever. Like, I'd rather them do that than, I don't know, them have to like, oh, how can we get to the basement? We need to do all this other crazy stuff. Like, just get there.
I think the biggest thing with that, it's a great point, is that the writing surrounding the conveniences is really well done.
Sure.
That's where it all comes, because I completely agree with you. Even when you go back and like, people love 80s. Like 80s, certain 80s movies are classics, but there are things you look at and you're like, all right. Like I so like it made more sense in 1989 than it's going to make in 2024. So I completely agree with you, but I do think that so much of what John Watts and Christopher Ford, I think Christopher Ford is the other writer's name.
Yeah.
Yes, Christopher Ford. What they're able to do week to week with the show is they still keep you engaged with the characters. I mean, we didn't have to watch this within 2 days of Christmas Eve, but we were still excited to see it. Mm-hmm. And we both came out of the episode still feeling good about the show and excited about where they're going with it.
For sure.
So I think that's definitely a testament to it. Was there anything else that we didn't cover?
No. I think we hit on a lot of things.
Anything for next week that you're anticipating, that you're hoping we see, that you're excited about coming off of episode 5?
I am interested to see Jod fully embracing Crimson Jack, because we hadn't seen that yet outside of just that little moment at the end of the episode. So how does he operate day to day? Like, I am being the selfish bastard that has gotten me this far.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. I mean, I think Jude Law's been awesome in this show.
Jude Law rocks.
Jude Law rocks, dude. We are big Jude Law fans here. But that is going to do it for our episode of covering episode 5 of Skeleton Crew here. Week to week, we're covering the show with you guys. We hope you guys are enjoying it. So please leave your comments. We want to know your thoughts on the episode. Hope you guys all had a happy holidays with your family. But we love talking Star Wars with you guys in the comment section. So please leave a comment, give this video a like if you can, and subscribe to us. We are 25 subscribers away as of the recording of this video from 500 subscribers. That's been our goal for a while. So if you guys can help us get there, we'd really, really appreciate it. And also, you guys can follow us on all our social medias. Check out some of our reels, some of our other content we have for you guys on Instagram, on Facebook. We're on Threads. We're on TikTok, everywhere. 2025 is going to be a very big year for us, and we still got more stuff coming before the end of the year for you guys. I just want to give Mark a chance to plug his own podcast that completely revolves around Star Wars.
Yeah, thank you, Darian. So I run the Star Wars Mark of Balance podcast. Go a little bit deeper into the nitty gritty of Star Wars. I talk books, movies, TV shows, video games, anything Star Wars. I'm probably talking about it. So would love to see you over there on any streaming platform you listen to your podcast on. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at @star_wars_Mark of Balance. So thank you, Darian.
Thank you, Mark, for joining us week to week. Just signing off. I am Darian Scalamoni.
I'm Mark Alcabino.
And we will see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.